Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, and it is Monday night, February the 14th, Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody, and I'm glad to be here, glad to be able to do these shows. This is Child Abuse Prevention, and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. It's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open, and I don't know if I popped the link in there or not, but I found this article that I found really quite interesting, and this is from the Mudrasham Institute of Spiritual Studies, when you grow up in a dysfunctional family. And this is from www.mudrashram.com /dysfunctionalfamily2.html. And I'll pop, let me see, I'm just going to check my chat room, see if I did pop that link in there. No, I didn't. I'll pop that link into the chat room. But this is quite interesting, this information here regarding growing up in a dysfunctional family. I find this interesting because I grew up in a dysfunctional family, and it's still very much dysfunctional, and it never was was there ever a time where it wasn't dysfunctional. So my whole life has been all about dysfunctional role playing, and I'm learning how to actually deal with that. But I think that a lot of people, grow up in dysfunctional homes, dysfunctional families, playing dysfunctional roles, and there's lots and lots of people out there who could benefit from this information. So that's why I thought I'd talk about this here tonight, and even for myself. Like, I know this is helpful for me. So that's what I want to talk about here tonight, and it'll probably carry on over into Wednesday night's show as well. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm not a counselor or therapist or anything like that. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, mainly because I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we're working to stop child abuse, right? We're working to stop and prevent child abuse and promote education and awareness regarding the issues that surround child abuse and domestic violence and just the whole issues of abuse. That's my main goal. And so I'm always studying, always looking for information, and I'm also a survivor, so that's why I do these shows for many reasons, actually. And so you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive topic. It's a very sensitive subject. A lot of people might find it very difficult to listen to and quite uncomfortable. So if you're uncomfortable with the topics of abuse of any type, then you don't want to listen to my show, right? Make the right decision for yourself, and make sure that you're in a comfortable enough place to listen to the show, right? And if you're under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, because I'm not sure where the Blog Talk players are now. They could be placed around anywhere, and I'm just not sure where they're at, and so I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my shows. So if you're under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, mainly because I talk about a lot of adult content, adult material, and also there's a chat room present. So if you're here and you're in the chat room, you have to know how to keep yourself safe in the chat room, right? We're fighting to save children's lives, save your kids' lives. If you don't know how to keep yourself safe online, you make sure you get that information by typing into your browser, Internet Safety for Children, Online Safety, things like this. And that'll take you to websites that'll show you how to keep yourself safe when you're online. It is so important. You do not want to be a victim of a child sexual predator or pedophile. That is just not something we don't want that to happen to you, or your friends. So make sure you get the information and then pass it on, right? Keep yourself safe. That's the smart thing to do, and that's the best thing to do. And so we'll get right into this material here. Mudrashram Institute of Spiritual Studies. This is where this came from, but I just found this article. This was posted, I believe, a week or two ago on, it was kind of going around like on Facebook and different places like that, but it was posted on Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, the main domain website. And that is dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. You can type in your browser dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. That's our website. And it's one of the actual articles in there under the helpful links, and also I think it was posted under child abuse headlines. A couple different places on the website that it was posted. But I wanted to take a look at it because I grew up in a dysfunctional home, dysfunctional family, and I think this information is probably pretty helpful for most people who have had to deal with this and grow up in the dysfunctional families, right? So many of us have. It's kind of old information from 1992. It was written by George A. Boyd, but the information is still good because it's just kind of taking a look at what is dysfunctional family, what is a dysfunctional family, what are the types of dysfunctional families, what are healthy families, what are unhealthy families, right? All this stuff. There's quite a lot of information on this website, so I hope everybody will check it out. And I'll make sure I pop the link into the chat room just in case somebody happens to be in there and you want to check this out. It's really interesting. And the dysfunctional, It's kind of, this is a neat article because it kind of describes like what is dysfunctional, right? What is a dysfunctional family? It says when you grow up in a dysfunctional family, you experience trauma and pain from your parents' actions, words, and attitudes. Because of this trauma you experienced, you grew up changed, different from other children, missing important parts of necessary parenting that prepare you for adulthood, missing parts of your childhood when you were forced into unnatural roles within your family. For some of you, it has led you to attempt to flee the pain of your past by alcohol or drug use. Others of you feel inexplicably compelled to repeat the abuses that were done to you on your own children or with your own spouse. Others of you have felt inner anxiety or rage and don't know why you feel as you do. So I think this is really quite interesting what this person, George A. Boyd, has written here. Just the things that, growing up in these dysfunctional families with these, taking on these roles within the family, we're definitely would be different than a family who's healthy and who is functioning healthy, right? And so there are lots of problems. It doesn't mean that somebody who's grown up in a dysfunctional home would every one of them would go out and do drugs. Even within my own home, there were siblings that did not use alcohol or drugs as young people. Not all of us turned to drugs, not all of us turned to alcohol, and so it even varies between siblings. It varies between people in the family, even within a dysfunctional family. So it doesn't affect everybody the same way. But it's just that from the studies that they do, they can kind of tell that it can cause a lot of problems, and it can cause people want to escape the pain or the reality of what they're living in, especially if it's abusive and dysfunctional. Not all dysfunctional homes are abusive, you know what I mean? They just might be dysfunctional and just not functioning well, but there's a lot of dysfunctional homes that are abusive, and that's the type that I grew up in. And so, in order to sort of get away from the reality of that horror film, really, that was playing all the time when I was a young person, I did turn to drugs, and not so much alcohol, a little bit of alcohol, but mainly drug use. And not everybody will do that. Some people won't, some people do, right? But it says others of you have felt inner anxiety or rage and don't know why you feel as you do. Now, I know I had a lot of that. I talk about a lot of this stuff on my morning show, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. But I went through a whole period of like 2 months of looking at the shame rage. What is anger? What is healthy anger? And anger, what is unhealthy anger, right? Which is rage and abusive behaviors. Anger is necessary and natural, but when it's distorted, it becomes abusive. It becomes self-injurious. It becomes, where a person uses their anger to hurt somebody. That's a perversion or a distortion of anger. So there's all kinds of really interesting stuff out there people can study. If you have dealt with this stuff, or if you've lived in this and you're not sure if your own behaviors are manifesting because of the way you were brought up or because of the way you grew up. So many times, that's how I grew up. I grew up in a violent home and a very angry, home. So I was angry as a child, and I was angry all the way through my teen years, and carried a lot of that anger. Didn't want to hurt anybody, so I sort of internalized it, and then it became inner rage, sort of a toxic inner shame rage connection thing, which I'm really glad that I found that information, because I was able to work through quite a lot of my stuff, right? So it's out here for people. If anybody wants to have something in particular that they just haven't been able to find any information on, you can always get a hold of me to see if I actually have it, because I do a lot of research, right? So I'm always researching all the time online. So I have tons and tons of resources as far as articles and where to look for things and where to find things, right? So this person goes on to say, you were innocent and your life was changed dramatically by forces in your family you had no control over. And now you are an adult survivor of that trauma. This article will discuss what these families are like, what is the impact of growing up in these families, and what you can do to begin the process of healing. So it says roles within dysfunctional families. A dysfunctional family is one in which the relationships between the parents and children are strained and unnatural. This is usually because one of the family members has a serious problem that impacts every other member of the family, and each member of the family feels constrained to adapt atypical roles within the family to allow the family as a whole to survive. So usually because one of the family members has a serious problem that impacts every other member of the family, and each member of the family feels constrained to adapt these roles, right, within the family to allow the family to survive, right. So the spouse in this family may enable the problem spouse to maintain employment by lying for him or her, for example. He or she may become obsessive about the problem spouse's abnormal behavior, such that he or she loses perspective in his or her own life, a pattern that is called codependency. That's what I also grew up with, a whole lot of codependent behaviors. Codependency. Sharon Wegscheider referred to this family role in alcoholic families as that of the enabler. And so that's, my parents were not alcoholics, but they were very much codependent and just about everything. They had all kinds of issues, but I know that they definitely were codependent. And so, in them being codependent, they taught us how to be codependent. And my family's still very much codependent, except for I've broken away from that. But the only way I could do that was to break off my ties with my family, because they're all very much codependent and just are still playing those roles that they were given as children in that dysfunctional family without getting any help. So I can't, because I'm on my healing journey and I'm moving past them and around them, and to heal and to take on some healthy behaviors. I can't really hang out with them, you know what I mean? Because they're not doing that. So they're still playing this very, very dysfunctional and very distorted roles. So, and they're expecting me to play them too, but I refuse. So now, now I'm I'm on the outs with everybody because I'm on my healing journey. So it's unfortunate, but that happens. And if the family doesn't heal together, I'm just one prime example of what can happen. This is, the children also assume roles within the family to make up for the deficiencies of parenting. Sharon Wegscheider referred to these roles within the alcoholic family as the hero, the scapegoat, the lost child, and the mascot. So these are the roles that children will take on in these dysfunctional families, right? Codependent dysfunctional families. There's Sharon Wegscheider, I'm not sure who that is, but that's who they refer to, referred to the roles within this type of family as the hero, the scapegoat, the lost child, and the mascot. So the enabler protects and takes care of the problem spouse, and whom Sharon Wegscheider refers to as the dependent, so that the dependent is never allowed to experience the negative consequences of his or her actions. And while the enabler feels angry and resentful about the extra burden that is placed upon him or her by the dependent's unhealthy, irresponsible, and antisocial behavior, he or she may feel powerless to do anything about it. So that's if the person who is enabling this other person to keep on behaving that way and to keep on, doing whatever they're doing that is actually really destroying the family or causing a lot of problems within the family, the person who's actually enabling all of a sudden will feel the extra burden of it. So they start to get angry, they start to get resentful. And I know that my mom was like that because my parents were very much, they weren't alcoholics or anything like that, but they were very much enablers, and they were very much always feeling resentful about the fact that, they were just having to do this, and they were having to do this. My mom was always, well, I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I've had to do this all my life, and blah, 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 and put up with all this stuff from your father, and blah, blah, blah. And, very resentful, very hateful, angry. That's what that can cause. It's because they're not getting their own needs met, but they've taken on this role, so they don't really quite know how to get out of it. You know what I mean? They don't really know how to quite drop the role because they've been doing it for so long. My mom did that her whole life and really didn't know how to be any other way. And so that's the problem with that. My mom grew up like that and continued right on in it all the way until she died, right? It's horrible. But people do, and it's sad because they don't take a look at the situation and say, man, I need some help with this. This is too much for anybody, and no one should have to take this stuff on by themselves, But many times people will not get help. The families, parents will not get help for their problems. And so who pays the price? The kids do, right? The children always do. And it's really unfortunate because it's not the children's fault. It's the two adults in the situation or the one adult in the situation who's not taking responsibility for the whole issue and getting some help, right? So many times parents like to blame other people and blame their children without taking a look at themselves. And my parents were two of the biggest ones for that. They would never ever take responsibility, even though they were brought up on abuse charges and everything else. They both blamed each other and blah 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 and skirted around and tried to make it out like it was all the other person's fault, and they never ever would take responsibility for their behavior. So they said the enabler feels that they must act this way because otherwise the family might not survive. And while the family is afforded survival by the enabler's responsibility, the enabler may pay the cost of the stress-related illness and never have their own time, their own needs met, right? And if it's being a martyr for the family, well, that's what my mom was. But the thing is, people would call my mom a martyr. Like some of my older siblings would say, you know, my mom was a martyr. She was always hurting herself, and then she'd end up in the hospital, and she'd be like, it's because you kids don't help me clean, because my mom was not supposed to be down on her hands and knees because she had so many surgeries on her stomach that the last time she had surgery, they said, if we have to do one more surgery, you'll die because you have no more stomach tissue left really that we can sew up. So if you have one more surgery, that's it. We cannot fix you, right? She had so many health problems. And they told her never ever get down on your hands and knees because that was the issue. She had major hernias and she had so many problems and weak stomach lining, and she had so many kids. She had 10 kids that went, full birth. Only 7 of us made it, but the other 3 were born stillborn. But she was just so sick, and so she would get down on her hands and knees and scrub the floor, and then end up in the hospital, and then she could cry the blues and say, "Oh, you guys, nobody helps me. I have the worst children in the whole world and the worst husband." But she would just do that to make herself look like she was just working so hard and she was just doing everything, and she would hurt herself in order to get sympathy, right? So some people called her a martyr. I just call her. I used to just figure that she was just looking for sympathy, and that was her way of getting some attention. Really, she just wanted attention, and so that's not a good way to get attention. Ended up in the hospital having to have surgery. It's just that she was hurting. She was always hurting, and she never really knew how to get any help, even though they had social workers step in, they had counselors step in. My parents were both very screwed up, and today, had they been brought up on charges, I believe that we would have been removed from the home because they would have seen that my parents both had way too many mental problems and way too many emotional problems, and they would have said, look, you guys are going to screw these kids up. You've got to get yourself some help. You prove that you can get yourself some help. You get your own counseling. You get we'll do an assessment, then we'll let the kids come back in after the kids have some counseling, right? But you all need to separate for a while because my parents were so mentally ill. It was just it's just crazy, that we were actually allowed to stay in the home, right? But that's the way it goes. So, and then, there's all these other people that enabled them. Like they had their own sets of friends. This is why I speak out against abuse, because abusers, who are they? Well, their parents, their moms, their dads, their grandparents, grandma, grandpa, aunt and uncle, Aunt Jane and Uncle Joe, brothers, sisters. That's abusers, right? Cousins, mainly family members. I hope people know this. And it's sad because there's always so many people who will support the abusers and who won't support the kids, and that's because the other adults don't have the relationship with the children. If you do any studying at all, please do some studying on what is abuse, who are the perpetrators, why is abuse allowed to continue on, and get the true picture of what's really happening. Because if you stop to think about it, there's a set of situations that's always constant, always the norm, and it's the fact that children are children. It's anyone under the age of whatever the age of consent is in the state, like 16 or 18 or whatever. Adults are adults. That's anybody over that age. And if an abuser can be anybody, and who has relationships with these children? Who's going to protect these children? Nobody. Who's going to protect the abusers? Everybody, because they have a relationship with them. Nobody wants grandpa to go to jail. Nobody wants to see mom carted off to jail because she's burned the children again or beaten on the children again. Nobody wants dad to go to jail because he's raped half the kids in the family again. But this is why I speak out against abuse, because people like to minimize it. They like to sugarcoat it. They like to protect the abusers, and silence is the issue. And the more people say, "Oh, well, it's not that big of a deal," no, it is a big deal. For every one of these kids out here that's being abused right now, it's a real big deal. And I can tell you because it's coming from somebody who's been there. It's a huge problem. And there's so many people that like to enable abusers. So even enablers within the home will enable the abuse. They'll allow it to continue on. They'll allow it to happen. And then they'll make everybody feel like they had nothing to do with it. Oh, it wasn't my fault. You know what I mean? And of course, nobody wants grandma and grandpa to go to jail because grandparents abuse children too. Anybody can be an abuser. Kids can be abusers. We all know this. Everybody can be an abuser, right? So it's very important for people to not allow this stuff to go on within their homes. You know what I mean? And not protect abusers, right? Because these kids do not deserve to be treated this way, right? And the reason I decided to go forward with my story is because I'm so sick and tired of just knowing that there's so many people out here who protect abusers, and they will continue to do so. Because I love my husband. I can't send my husband away to jail just because he's raped our daughter. Because people are raping their kids left and right. Let me tell you that. All you got to do is start paying attention to the headlines, right? I mean, this is really what frustrates me. Like we Yep, that's what it is. I think it's just Skype, and I think it's just our internet providers. They don't like Skype, and they don't like the fact that we're using Skype to do these shows and whatnot. So they have a way of cutting all the Skype calls out, right? And it's just done system wide, right? So it's not like they're personally picking on my computer. They just do it to all the Skype connections, right? People use Skype, so that's a real problem. But I don't really know a way to get around it. But the whole issue is if the telephone companies would lower their long distance rates, we wouldn't have to use Skype. So the issue is there's children out here being abused horrifically, and there's people that are enabling it. There's people that are allowing it. So that's also another example of an enabler. But enablers also will, enable a person's bad behaviors, even if there's no real abuse in the home. It could be just irresponsible or antisocial behavior that somebody, like the other spouse, might enable. And then of course they're not getting their needs met, so they feel frustrated, and it just sets up a real problem for the family. They said the paradoxical thing about the enabler's behavior is that by preventing the dependence crisis, he or she also prevents the painful corrective experience that crisis brings, which may be the only thing that makes the dependent stop the downward spiral of addiction. And that's like if it's someone who has a substance abuse problem or alcohol problem or whatever, or like. For instance, my dad's case, my dad was mentally ill. He was borderline schizophrenic, and really, by my mom enabling the whole thing and just going along with the abuse that he was inflicting upon her, going along with she was also abusing the kids too, so it wasn't just my dad. But by her backing it up and being abusive herself, what she should have done was really just behave herself and then get my dad some help so that he would go and get some counseling and get some pills, because he really would have done so much better probably on medication, right? Because he's borderline schizophrenic, so that's the whole issue. He had all kinds of problems. And, her behavior would have been so much better because she wouldn't have been putting up with him abusing her. And then I think in turn she would have abused me or the other siblings as much, because maybe she would have still abused us a little, but not like she did out of rage and just complete hatred because she was so angry because of the situation she was in. So it was like a little circle. It was a circle, like, it affected the whole entire family. And it was because nobody, the responsible people in the home, the two people who should have been responsible, which were my parents, were not responsible. And so it was a big cycle of a mess, right? A huge mess. So they say that the hero role played by the child, the hero, who is usually the oldest child, is characteristically over-responsible and overachiever. The hero allows the family to be reassured it is doing well, as it can always look to the achievements of the oldest son or daughter as a source of pride and esteem. While the hero may excel in school, be a leader on the football team or a cheerleader, or obtain well-paying employment, inwardly they are suffering from painful feelings of inadequacy and guilt, as nothing that they do is good enough to heal the family's pain. So that's kind of interesting, because my older siblings might have felt a little bit like that, because the family started to really spiral downhill right around the time my sister, I guess, got married and moved out of the home, and my brother left shortly after that. The two oldest siblings, he was 16 when he moved out. He just left. He was just gone. My sister left. She was older than him. She moved out, got married, and they might have felt a little bit. I don't think they took on the guilt from that, though. My brother did actually tell me, my oldest brother told me that he was sorry that he couldn't take me with him when he left, because he says, you were just a baby and there's no way I could have looked after you, but he says, I knew what you were going to suffer in that home. See, none of us, ever thought of getting any help. You know what I mean? It was our life. It was what we knew. When you're brought up like that, that's all you know. It's what you call battered child syndrome. It's like a baby who grows up from zero all the way through, you know, to whatever, 15, 16 years old till they finally run away or something or whatever. If they do run away, they're going to be, that's the norm for them. See, this was the norm for me, and that's why I really try to fill people in on this very important fact. You know what I mean? That it wasn't like the abuse started when I was 10 years old and it was great before, and then all of a sudden it got really bad. Or it wasn't like it was really bad for the first 2 years and then it got great. It was always bad, and it was never good, right? And so that's why it was constant. That's for sure. It was one steady, constant thing. It was always bad. So at least I did have some sort of constant in my life. It wasn't good and then bad and then good and bad, right? It was always bad. So that's kind of interesting. But I think that, you know, my brother, there's no way he could have looked after me. I mean, I was just a little baby, and he was 16 on the street, so he has no way. So do I blame him? Absolutely not. Would any of us gotten anybody any help? Absolutely not. We were all growing up in this home of complete dysfunction and mental illness and every sort of abusive, horrific thing going on that you could think of, pretty much. Sadly enough, you know, that's what we knew. That's what my parents knew. That's what we knew. And so, you know, we just grew up in that, right? Horrible, absolutely horrible. But that's what people will do. So they said the hero's compulsive drive to succeed may in turn lead to self-related illness and compulsive overworking. The hero's qualities of appeasement, helpfulness, and nurturing of his or her parents may cause others outside the family to remark upon the child's good character and obtain, you know, him or her much positive attention, right? They look like the good kid, right? But inwardly, the hero feels isolated, unable to express his or her true feelings or to experience intimate relationships, and is often out of touch with his or her own sources of spirituality. Both of my siblings were kind of like that. My brother was always looking for his own spirituality, and my sister actually never did find hers. I don't know if she did right after she died. We were with her the day before she died, but she passed away from cancer a few years ago. And my brother, he's still, I think, very much looking for his spirituality, and he's almost, like, he's 60-something years old now. But they go on to talk about the different roles that children will take on. The scapegoat, who is often the second-born, characteristically acts out in anger and defiance, often behaving in delinquent ways, but inwardly they feel hurt in that the family's attention has gone to the dependent or the hero, and they are being ignored. The scapegoat's poor performance in school, experimentation with drugs, alcohol, promiscuous sexuality, flaunting of conversations of conventions of society, or involvement in adolescent gangs or criminal activity may lead him or her to be labeled the family's problem. Many of my middle brothers were the scapegoat. And even myself, I was kind of one of the last scapegoats. Well, I was the last child born, so I was the last scapegoat. But the thing is this is pretty heavy duty roles that people take on. And if you don't, you know, if we as survivors of abuse don't know how to change that and how to make sure you do get that information. I found all kinds of good information, but John Bradshaw in particular has some great information about the dysfunctional roles, the roles that we were given as children to play out for the rest of our lives, which if we don't get some help with, sometimes people do play those out for the rest of their lives, which is unfortunate because those roles were given to us by dysfunctional people who had no business doing that to us in the first place. Unhealthy roles, right? So we need to learn how to change that around to help ourselves so that we can lead healthy, normal, you know, whatever we consider, like whatever is considered to be normal, healthy, happy, satisfying lives, right? So, you know, if you need any information, get a hold of me here on Blog Talk Radio. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. And we'll finish looking at this on Wednesday. I just found this was very interesting, and I wanted to take a look at it because it has everything to do with what happens to children when they grow up in dysfunctional, abusive homes. You know what I mean? And maybe even if there isn't any abuse, it could be just a dysfunctional environment, right? But the more violence and the more abuse involved, the worse it'll be. And so that's why I think it's so important for people to realize this is all about child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention. You know, how people are treated as children will very much affect their lives. And so it's so important that we do all we can to stop child abuse, right? Do whatever you can within your own communities, within your own lives. Make sure your own children are not being abused. You know, if you need some information, get a hold of us, dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. Get a hold of me, and I'll be around. And if you need some info or you'd like to volunteer with Dreamcatchers or whatever, but be sure and, you know, make sure that the children in your own lives are not being abused. We could stop a lot of abuse. We could stop 90 to 95% of abuse if everybody would do that, right? So protect your children and do all you can to keep them safe, right? So have a great night, everybody, and happy Valentine's Day. And, learn to love yourselves. If you're a survivor of abuse, check out Dreamcatchers for Abused Children here on Blog Talk Radio, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. Ray Luskin and myself were just on there tonight talking about self-love and self-nurturing and learning how to take care of ourselves, right? It's very important. So have a great night, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.